You are listening to Buddha's Healing a Sanctuary, to contemplate the Buddha's teachings and live a life of serenity amidst the world. The invisible darkness of depression and the entrapment within the ego, amidst the rushing currents of the modern era. As humanity takes endless strides in material and technological advancements, we are witnessing a profoundly heartbreaking paradox. That is, the sudden surge of an illness that sheds no blood, does not immediately destroy the physical body, yet gnaws at and devastates vitality from deep within, the disease of depression. Unlike physical pains that can be easily seen with the naked eye, depression is an invisible shadow that completely blankets the mind, imprisoning a person in a closed room devoid of the light of joy and the warmth of hope. Why is this topic so profoundly crucial and urgent? Because depression is no longer the story of a single individual or a specific age group. It is present in every corner of life. From young people bewildered at the crossroads, to those who have reached the pinnacle of fame and wealth, all can unexpectedly collapse before the darkness of the inner mind. When one falls into the deep abyss of depression, every color of the world seems to turn to ash. Things that once brought joy now become meaningless. Daily existence is no longer a privilege of life, but transforms into a massive burden, an exhausting, endless battle fought right on one's own bed. However, if we merely view depression through the lens of Western medicine, seeing it simply as a deficiency of neurotransmitters in the brain, or a temporary psychological shock, then perhaps we have only touched the tip of the iceberg. Under the illuminating light of the Buddha's Dharma, the profound suffering of the mind does not naturally arise from nothingness, but stems from a remarkably deep, subtle root that is solidly entrenched in human consciousness. That is the presence of an enormous ego, a clinging and tight grasping to the self that we have inadvertently nourished from one lifetime to the next. The larger the ego, the heavier its protective shell becomes. When that shell is battered and scratched by life, the resulting injury is immense. As long as we do not clearly understand the true nature of this clinging, the path out of depression will forever remain a struggle in despair. The misconceptions that imprison humanity in the dungeon of despair. In a desperate attempt to escape the darkness of this mental illness, many people inadvertently fall into severe misconceptions in how they perceive and treat it. These illusions not only fail to bring liberation, but, conversely, tighten the chains that bind the soul. The first misconception: identifying oneself with suffering. This is the most subtle trap laid by the ego. When feeling sad or hopeless, instead of recognizing that there is an emotion of sadness passing through the mind, one often tells oneself and clings firmly to the thought, "I am a suffering person. This is my pain. This past is mine." This identification is dangerous because it turns a temporary psychological state into a permanent part of one's identity. The ego begins to take the trauma as its identity, embracing the pain as a precious, inseparable asset. When you cling tightly to my pain, you inadvertently slam shut all doors to self-healing. Because the mind implicitly understands that if this pain is lost, the ego will also cease to exist. The second misconception: escaping into worldly pleasures to fill the internal void, when unable to bear the emptiness and torment within. A natural human reflex is to seek external stimulants. Some dive into all-night revelries. Some borrow the intoxication of alcohol to temporarily forget reality. Some throw themselves into work frantically. or eagerly seek validation and praise on social media platforms. All of these are merely temporary painkillers, creating a false shell of happiness. But when the crowd disperses, when night falls and silence returns, the loneliness and depression rise again 1,000 times stronger, tearing at the inner self more fiercely due to the massive discrepancy between the external ego and the internal emptiness. The third misconception, blaming circumstances and rejecting reality. When the ego is injured, its instinct is to find a target to blame in order to protect its pride. You blame your parents for not providing a warm childhood. Blame your spouse for their betrayal. Blame fate for being too unfair. Wallowing in resentment and playing the victim is the finest food to nourish the disease of depression every single day. It strips away all the internal power of self-mastery, leaving you forever like a drifting leaf, completely at the mercy of life's currents, without being able to light your own torch to walk forward. The light of wisdom from the Buddha's teachings on the nature of non-self and the liberation of the mind. To find the definitive cure at the root of modern depression, we must return to the core teachings of the Compassionate Father, which is the wisdom of non-self anatta. Throughout his life of spreading the Dharma, the Buddha always emphasized that all phenomena in this world, including our physical bodies and minds, are but a temporary combination of countless conditions and causes. The Buddha once compassionately revealed to his disciples a supreme truth: all phenomena are non-self. When a person uses wisdom to contemplate and attain this, they will immediately be liberated from all suffering. This truth is the golden key to unlocking the prison doors of depression. What then does non-self mean here? Non-self does not mean that we disappear or become senseless like wood and stone. Non-self is the profound and clear realization that there is no independent, eternal, and unchanging self. This physical body is borrowed from earth, water, wind, and fire. The thoughts, the emotions of joy, sorrow, and resentment surging in the mind are also just currents of energy, born from the impact of the external world and then fading away. They are not me, they are not mine, and they are not my true self. The disease of depression arises and takes deep root precisely because we have inflated the ego excessively. When the ego is too large, it is like a giant target erected between heaven and earth. Any arrow shot by life, a criticism, a loss, a betrayal, a failure in one's career can easily strike straight into that target, causing fatal wounds. When the ego demands that everything go its way, demands that the world treat it fairly, demands that love be eternal, that expectation will inevitably lead to disappointment and disillusionment, because the inherent nature of the world is impermanence. But when you begin to practice the understanding of non-self, that giant target will gradually shrink and eventually dissolve into emptiness. When there is no target, the arrows of criticism and adversity will only pass through a silent void, without being able to lodge anywhere to cause pain. The Buddha taught that contemplating the impermanence and non-self of all feelings is the way to extract poisonous arrows from the mind. When sadness strikes, instead of bracing to fight back or weeping, "Why am I suffering like this?" you only need to gently take a step back, calmly observe, and silently remind yourself, this is merely a sad feeling arising. It comes from conditions, and it will leave according to conditions. It is not me. The journey of letting go to reclaim the peaceful sky of the human realm. Profoundly understanding the root of depression and the mechanics of the ego holds a decisive significance for the life of every human being. For if we do not recognize the trap of the ego, we will forever search for cures on the outside, using chemical to force the nervous system into silence, while the tyrant named the ego continues to reign and scream within the consciousness. Letting go of an enormous ego is not an act of cowardice, nor is it abandoning life or losing one's self-worth. On the contrary, it is an act that demands supreme courage and a radiant wisdom. It is daring to face the darkest hidden corners, daring to tear down the walls of false pride, daring to admit the fragility of human existence so that, from there, one can open the heart to embrace all things. When the ego is refined and set down, the space within the soul suddenly becomes wondrously vast. The suffocating tightness of depression will automatically dissolve into the expansiveness of compassion and tolerant wisdom. To truly transform the modern disease of depression and return the body and mind to a state of purity, we need specific steps in mindfulness to dismantle each layer of the ego's protective shell. It is a process of turning inward, using the light of awakening to light one's own torch and walk, finding again the serene, gentle smile amidst the countless storms of human existence, the daily practice of detachment from the I. To heal depression at its very root, one must move beyond intellectual understanding and bring the wisdom of non-self into the very fabric of daily life. The mind is a relentless storyteller, and its favorite protagonist is the I from the moment we awaken until we fall asleep. The ego weaves a continuous narrative. I am successful, I am a failure, I am loved, I am abandoned, I am depressed. As long as esteemed practitioners believe in this narrator, they remain trapped in its tragic script. The first practical step toward liberation is cultivating the silent observer within. When the heavy clouds of depression roll into the mind, the habitual reaction is to drown in them, to let the darkness seep into every cell. Instead, the Buddha instructs us to step back and simply watch the weather of the mind. When a thought of despair arises, gently label it. Despair is arising. Notice how different this is from saying, I am despairing. By placing a wedge of mindful awareness between the observer and the emotion, you strip the emotion of its power. You begin to realize that you are not the storm. You are the vast, open sky in which the storm appears. The sky is never damaged by the dark clouds, nor is it stained by the rain. It simply allows the weather to pass. When the ego is no longer fed by your identification and resistance, the heavy, suffocating energy of depression begins to lose its momentum. It starves, shrinks, and eventually gives way to a profound, spacious inner peace. The tale of the exiled minister and the empty boat. To truly grasp the liberating power of emptying the ego, one can reflect upon the ancient story of Minister Liang. Liang was a man of immense pride and towering intellect in the imperial capital. For decades, he had built a flawless reputation, accumulating wealth, power, and the adoration of the masses. His entire identity was inextricably tied to his status. However, the wheel of worldly fortune is inherently impermanent. Through the deceitful schemes of rival courtiers, Liang was falsely accused of treason. The emperor, swayed by the lies, stripped Liang of his titles, confiscated his wealth, and banished him to a remote, desolate village in the southern marshlands. The loss of his grand identity crushed Liang. The man who once commanded armies now sat in a dilapidated hut, consumed by a severe, paralyzing depression. He refused to eat, his hair turned snow white, and his mind endlessly replayed the betrayal. How could they do this to me? I am a great minister. I have been ruined. My life is over. His ego, severely wounded, bled day and night, turning his existence into a living hell, fearing for his life. A loyal servant rowed Liang across the misty river to seek the counsel of a renowned Zen master who lived on a solitary island. When they arrived, the master was sitting peacefully by the riverbank. Liang fell to his knees, weeping bitterly. "Master, I am drowning in sorrow. I have lost everything I am. My reputation is destroyed, my enemies have triumphed. And my heart is filled with an agony so heavy I can no longer breathe. Please save me." The master looked at the broken man with gentle, compassionate eyes. "You are not suffering because you lost your wealth or your title, Liang. You are suffering because you are carrying a massive, invisible rock on your shoulders, and you refuse to put it down. Come, get in the boat with me." The master instructed Liang to sit at the bow of a small wooden boat, and together they drifted out into the middle of the river. The morning fog was incredibly thick, obscuring the opposite shores. As they sat in silence, suddenly, the shadowy silhouette of another boat emerged from the dense fog. Heading straight for them, Liang watched it approach, his anxiety rising. The other boat was moving fast. Caught in the current, "Watch out," Liang yelled into the mist. "Turn your boat, you are going to ram us." But there was no answer, and the boat kept coming. Liang's fear turned into boiling rage. He stood up, shaking his fist. "You blind fool, turn away. Do you not know who I am? How dare you steer so recklessly?" Crash! The approaching boat struck theirs heavily, sending Liang tumbling to the wooden floorboards. Furious, he scrambled up, ready to hurl curses at the careless oarsman. But as he looked into the offending vessel, his mouth fell open. The boat was completely empty. It had simply slipped its moorings upriver and drifted down with the current. Liang stood frozen, his face flushed red, his fists clenched, staring at the empty wood. There was no one to yell at. There was no enemy. There was no malicious intent. The Zen master smiled softly from the stern. "Tell me, Minister Liang, where did your anger go? A moment ago you were consumed by rage. You felt insulted and attacked. But now, seeing the boat is empty, the anger has vanished." "Why?" Liang stammered. Because there is no one there to be angry at. It was just the river's current." "Precisely," the master nodded. "When you thought there was a person in that boat, your ego felt threatened. You felt your space was violated, your safety compromised. The illusion of a self in the other boat clashed with the massive self in your own boat, creating suffering and rage." The master pointed to Liang's chest. "Your depression, your agony, your sleepless nights, they are exactly the same. You are holding onto the idea of a great minister Liang who has been wronged. You are carrying an enormous ego. A boat filled to the brim with pride, expectations, and the need for validation. When the unpredictable currents of life crash into you, your heavy boat shatters and you suffer terribly." The master leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper against the water. "If you wish to heal this profound sorrow, you must become the empty boat. Empty yourself of the I, the me, and the mine. If you cross the river of life as an empty boat, even if the harsh winds blow and the waves crash into you, who is there to be hurt? Who is there to be depressed?" Hearing these words, a profound silence washed over Liang's mind. The heavy, suffocating shell of his ego cracked open. In that misty morning, realizing the illusion of his own rigid identity, the exiled minister, finally laid down the massive burden he had carried his entire life, and wept tears of pure liberation. Universal spiritual lessons drawn from the empty boat. The story of the empty boat serves as a profound mirror for the modern epidemic of depression. The suffering we experience is deeply proportional to the size and density of the self we construct. When we build an identity based on career success, physical beauty, or the approval of others, we are sailing a very heavy, fragile boat on a highly unpredictable ocean. The waves of impermanence, loss, aging, criticism, and failure will inevitably strike. To overcome the dark depths of mental suffering, one must practice the art of emptying the boat. This means letting go of the rigid stories we tell about ourselves. It means accepting that we are not our titles. We are not our bank accounts, and most importantly, we are not our trauma. We are fluid, ever-changing manifestations of life. When the heart is cleared of the massive ego, there is nothing left to be easily offended, nothing left to desperately protect, and nothing left to spiral into despair when worldly conditions change. The healing of depression is not about finding a way to make the ego happy again. It is about realizing that true, unshakable joy only arises when the ego is finally allowed to rest in peace. By stepping out of the prison of the I, esteemed practitioners can step into the vast, limitless freedom of the present moment, living amidst the human realm without carrying its sorrow. As the profound resonance of the empty boat fades into the stillness of this moment, let esteemed practitioners allow the mind to gently settle. The journey through the dense, suffocating fog of depression is undoubtedly one of the most agonizing trials a human being can endure. Yet it is also a profound spiritual invitation, a desperate call from the deepest part of the soul, urging you to lay down a burden you were never meant to carry. Throughout this contemplation, we have illuminated the hidden architecture of mental suffering. Depression is not a sign of weakness, nor is it a permanent stain upon your existence. It is simply the exhaustion of an ego that has fought too hard, for too long, to control an uncontrollable world. It is the crushing weight of the armor we wear to protect the illusion of the I. When we finally realize that the armor is not protecting us, but suffocating us, the miraculous process of true healing begins. The daily cultivation of the empty boat, to truly transform the heavy lead of depression into the pure gold of inner peace. The wisdom of non-self must be practiced with immense patience and gentle compassion every single day. The ego will try to rebuild its walls, but with steady mindfulness, you can continuously dismantle them. The dawn of a nameless mind. Each morning, before you step out of bed and put on the heavy robes of your worldly identity, your job title, your past traumas, your societal roles, take 3 deep breaths. For those brief moments, be absolutely no one. You are not your failures and you are not your successes. You are simply breathing, simply existing. By starting the day as an empty vessel, you give the universe space to fill you with fresh, unburdened energy. The practice of radical acceptance. When the familiar shadows of sadness or lethargy creep back into the mind, do not panic. Do not brace yourself for a fight, and most importantly, do not judge yourself for feeling down. Greet the sadness at the door like a passing guest. Say to it, I see you, but you do not define me. By offering your pain a space of non-judgmental observation, you remove the ego's resistance, allowing the heavy emotion to simply pass through the vast sky of your consciousness and dissolve. Flowing with the river of impermanence, Reframe your relationship with life's unpredictable currents. When plans fall apart, when people change, or when your body ages, remind yourself that the nature of all things is constant flux. Do not fight the river. Do not try to steer the current. Surrender the need to be the great minister of your own life. And allow yourself to be the empty boat, peacefully bobbing along the waves, completely unharmed by the changing tides. A gentle reminder for the path of light. Dear listeners, the human experience is vast, beautiful, and inherently fragile. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to be constantly strong, successful, or unshakable. The greatest strength lies in the softness of a heart that has let go of its need to be someone. When the towering monument of the ego is gently dismantled, the dark shadow of depression it cast upon your life will naturally vanish. In its place, you will find an inner sanctuary of radiant, indestructible peace. You will discover that beneath the chaotic noise of the mind, your true nature is already whole, completely pure, and eternally free. If these shared reflections have brought a sense of serenity and a glimmer of light to the heart, esteemed practitioners are gently invited to subscribe to the Buddha's healing channel and leave a meaningful reflection below. Let us nurture a collective community of awakening, walking hand in hand out of the darkness. May all beings be free from the prison of the ego. May all minds find the courage to let go. And may the light of the Dharma guide every step through this transient world.